folks. Welcome. Thank you for being here at one of our webinars, where today we'll talk about anticipating the weather, risks and opportunities in operational management. Welcome. My name is Dr. Hansi Singh. I am founder and CEO of Planette AI. I am an Earth system scientist. I have worked with the US federal government at the US Department of Energy. I was also a professor. I still work as a working group co-chair for the Community Earth System Model at NCAR, the National Center for Atmospheric Research. And I started Planette because I saw so much opportunity in bringing awesome science from the research world to the real world to help folks make decisions, which is some of what we'll be going over today. So I'm really excited today to have Jan Berger here. Jan is one of our advisors, our board advisors here at Planette, and he has this amazing background in leading risk at major enterprises, including Live Nation, APL Logistics, and Jacuzzi. So I'm going to let Jan provide a little bit more background about himself before we get started.
Thanks, Hansi. Appreciate that. So this slide just highlights my background a bit, and I thought it was important. I'm essentially an engineer with an MBA. You can see my academic background here. Prior to getting an MBA, I had technical roles as a geologist, and post MBA, I've been an executive finance in the corporate treasury and chief risk officer roles. You can see the variety of industries here. Won't list them, but to the right are some marquee names where I've worked. And then currently, I've got a couple of board advisor roles, including Planette, and doing some consultant work as well. The point here is that I've had a lot of experience sitting on the seat in a corporation, viewing risk and observing risk for companies and providing insight and recommendations and risk mitigation measures to lower risk. So a little bit about sort of my philosophy before we get started. I had a strong affinity for academic excellence. I spent a lot of time in the physical sciences and in a financial academic role. I've done research. I've done teaching assistantships. I've recently been in the classroom at USC for their MBA risk management department. So I like to be involved in passing on experience and information to students. But understanding how the Earth works, what the processes are, how this relates to the environment is really important to me. I've gotten a perspective about how this dovetails with financial realities and risks. And so I've endeavored to foster collaboration across departments within my companies. And as you see here, weave together all these different aspects to really optimize solutions. So the takeaway from this slide is, I like to achieve better outcomes and optimize solutions. That's what I'm all about. So I'm happy to help Hansi in this role.
Yes, we're so grateful to have you. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to really get into certain industries and how weather comes into their operational management, both in terms of risks as well as opportunities. So we'll be talking about events, travel, mining, as well as supply chain and logistics. We'll be going relatively quickly through this. So if any of this sounds really interesting and exciting to you, throw us a line. You know where to find us on LinkedIn or through email, and just let us know, and we can have a deeper, longer discussion. So this is really going to go into many different areas and sort of just talk through some of the possibilities of being able to use weather, and specifically really good long-term weather forecasts for better operational planning. So, first of all, how does long range weather forecasting work? So, you might be used to your usual 14-day forecast on your phone, 14-day, 10-day, 7-day, etc. These rely on a very different modeling framework than anything beyond 14 days. So, these short-term forecasts come from atmosphere only models. And what we do is something called Earth system modeling, which is anything beyond 14 days. And so essentially, this is a much more comprehensive modeling framework. And so unlike, your usual meteorologist, we actually don't look just at the atmosphere, but also ocean, land, ice, because all of these together sort of provide the signals that we need for long range forecasting. And so this is where the real use of what we do comes from because we are able to look much longer into the future than your conventional forecast. Keep in mind, these are not day-to-day forecasts, but they are weekly, monthly, or even seasonal forecasts as we get deeper into the future, up to a year ahead. So, the fundamentals of weather and operations are, first of all, that weather drives business interruption, but that it can also give opportunities, particularly if you know how to find them. So, let's talk about the interruption first. Across sectors, we know that weather causes something like 25 to 40% of all business interruptions. And keep in mind that these numbers are often higher for environmentally vulnerable industries. So, this includes energy specifically where weather accounts for nearly one in two interruptions, agriculture, outdoor events, any type of natural resource sort of industry, including mining, logistics, and transport, of course. So, some illustrations of this. Business interruption is costly. So, economic losses due to weather in the US only have been over 100 billion a year in recent years. But this is not only a physical damage number, this is actually a business interruption number. And so the business interruption is a major component of this total cost. So here's an example from mining. So if you have a large mine and that mine is down for, say, an hour, that business interruption cost is $150,000 or more per hour. Or for an even larger mine, it could be $5 million a day or more. So business interruption is a huge element of the cost. And of course, that doesn't even account for any of that physical damage, which, adds on top of this, if there was physical damage related to that weather event. So, what does this mean? Because these unplanned closures are expensive, often businesses go out of business when too many of these happen. These are also incredibly expensive for insurers. A large part of what they insure is not just physical loss, but also this loss of business, this interruption. And at the same time, there are huge effects on upstream and downstream users that use whatever that business produces. So, for example, if the business is producing chips, then anybody that uses those chips, such as consumer electronics, are going to see major impacts. And these impacts can occur for months, years, even a decade. We still see some of the impacts of, a weather event a decade ago in terms of impacts on the supply chain, for example. So weather can also create business opportunities. And here is one example of how that is, because I know that, we talk about opportunities and we're like, oh yeah, there's opportunities. Well, here's one example. So suppose that we knew that there was a colder than usual winter season expected. And so this was actually something we started talking about last year. I think in September, we specifically started talking about it in terms of some of the fundamentals of the Earth system, that this was going to be a colder than usual winter, which, more or less did pan out specifically in the eastern part of our country. And so, in particular, if you know that it's going to be a colder than usual winter season, then perhaps as a company, you make sure that you have plenty of road salt and road maintenance supplies. And so, what this means for you is that your inventory management is a lot better, and that now there are even more opportunities for retail sales because chances are that not all of your competitors looked at the long range forecast. So this is just one example. We can come up with many different examples. Once again, just keep in mind that this is an area where not all industries are using these forecasts. So there's a lot of possibility here. And so this is what we're going to try to get into in the course of this webinar. So the first industry we want to talk about is live events. So weather-related disruptions are increasing, and this is not just cancellations, but also delays, evacuations, sets that are cut short, heat and smoke incidents and other incidents to health. And these disruptions are costly. So here's one example. This is a very catastrophic example. So this is the Bonnaroo Music Festival in June. It was canceled, and it was canceled because of torrential downpours linked to severe convective storm activity. This was the actual rainfall that week. And this was our 3 week forecast lead time rainfall. This was the average. This was the 75th percentile. This is a facility that has been known to flood in the past. Chances are, if there was a risk manager who maybe had been looking at these forecasts, they would have, had it in their mind that this, could be a significant event. And in fact, when this event was canceled, losses were in the tens of millions of dollars because this is an event that hosts about 50,000 concert goers, as well as some really big names. And so these are losses in refunds, in things that are already scheduled and paid for, like vendors and other services, other types of on-site spending. So it was pretty major for this specific regional festival. So, Jan, I would love to sort of hear your perspective on this from someone who has worked on risk at Live Nation and how you approach this.
Sure. So, having had the role of and responsibility for global risk management at Live Nation for 6 years, this is near and dear to my heart. Clearly, you're operating events outside, whether it's an amphitheater or festival environment. You've got infrastructure strategies, you've got safety planning and risk mitigation you can look at. And if you have the opportunity for flexibility in scheduling, you might adjust your schedule if you knew an event a few months ahead of time was going to be impacted by the weather. So, sitting in my seat, I actually experienced these things firsthand. I recall buying weather insurance for a particular festival that the site was in a floodplain. So these things are real. Clearly, and you'll see this theme in all of my conversations, is once you're aware of potential risks, you want to alert the operating side of the business and senior management of potential risks to the event. As I mentioned, evaluate insurance and other risk transfer opportunities. The weather insurance example was one that was implemented. Identify risk control measures, like protection structures, mud mitigation. Oftentimes we'd know there was going to be rain a week before or a few days before an event, so we'd buy hay to lay out to avoid flooding situations or muddy situations. And then if we knew ahead of time, we might have been able to adjust inventory procurements, different types of concession items, ponchos, hats, sweatshirts, and so on. So it's a tool. Having known this weeks or months in advance, as a risk manager, I would have really great recommendations to propose to operations and
Great. Thank you for that overview. And once again, we're going pretty quickly through these. So if anything here resonates, let us know and we can have a deeper conversation. So now we're going to move to travel and hospitality, specifically that weather accounts for 40 to 45% of all reported travel disruptions. And so very particularly for folks that like to travel on vacation, Long range predictions are actually really excellent in the tropics. And so there is just a ton of opportunities in the places where many folks love to travel and vacation. So here's an example. So last month as well as the previous month, there was just a ton of rainfall over Hawaii. We predict very well over this part of the Pacific. And so, I was talking about this on LinkedIn, like, hey guys, there's going to be a lot of rain. And, we're seeing it for the next few weeks into the next month. And this is definitely information that if you were a traveler, if you were on the fence about, oh, do I want to go at this time, this might have been something that might have influenced your decision. So this is the kind of information that a long range forecast can provide. So Jan, if you're sitting, say, at risk management at Hilton, for example, which was one of the many facilities that actually flooded associated with some of this heavy rainfall in March and April. Yeah, would just love to hear your perspective on how you would deal with this.
Sure. So, had I been a risk manager there, clearly, this kind of information can impact. You might have, a dozen or more properties in the Hawaii space. Um, it can impact, as I say here, reservations, occupancy, and guest and employee safety. Um, and pre-knowledge, you would be able to plan ahead. Um, and again, offer promotions or discounts to build occupancy, knowing this is going to happen in a few months. And maybe you would limit cancellations despite the weather, or maybe you could even offer alternative things to do other than play on the beach. But next slide, please.
Yep.
As a risk manager, again, alerting senior management of this incident or this potential for bad weather. You'd want to go to your resorts and protect low-lying areas, secure coastal or beach sites. You'd want to inspect, the location, the facility. Are your drains clear? Are your walkways safe? Do you have roofs and gutters that need inspecting? And then recommend, again, inventory procurements. You might want to have a varied food and beverage offering or umbrellas on hand, these kinds of things. So as a risk manager, you can be very proactive in helping a business weather through this weather event.
Great. Thank you. Moving on to mining, where Jan, actually, you have some like very specific experience in this sector. So I mean, I probably don't need to say this, but weather does cause catastrophic disruptions, specifically in mining. And in particular, though, it's also important to note that it's not only those catastrophic disruptions, but are also just steady operational interruptions that do add up. And these operational interruptions, once again, it's not only weather, but weather is a major component. So once again, our forecasts are extremely good. Long range forecasts are just so good in the tropics, right? And so, for example, there was a huge catastrophe at Grasberg Mine, a mudslide, and this actually showed up in our forecast about 5 months before the catastrophe happened. And this catastrophe was associated with 200 million in losses in Q3. A lot of those were physical losses, but a lot of those were also losses due to business interruption. And the mine is still operating at only partial capacity. So these operational losses are still continuing over 6 months after the event, which is pretty significant. That's a long time to be dealing with reduced production and revenue. So, Jan, from your perspective within this particular industry, like how do you approach risk management?
Sure. So just a couple of things. The Grasberg mine is in a remote site in Indonesia, just for the audience. And
Yep.
um, I spent 8 years at a global mining company, Homestake Mining, and early in my career, and headed up risk management for 6 of those years. And the weather is a huge impact and element to keeping a mine going, um, particularly open pit mines like the Grasberg mine. There's a lot of slope stability issues. There's associated tailings ponds, which are where wastewater is stored. And then also the production facilities, the crushing facilities can be impacted by weather. So pre-knowledge is certainly important to the business. Anytime you interrupt mining production, that means less ore is going through the facility and your product is being delayed for sale. So extremely important. And again, there's obviously a lot of workers on site and safety issues are paramount. So having pre-knowledge gives you the ability to inspect, to adjust dates of events like blasting or maintenance, and keep the mine safe and keep it operating. So sitting in the risk manager seat, you want to keep senior management abreast of this, of course. You want to work with the local mine engineers to evaluate slope conditions, environmental maintenance, as I mentioned, and make sure that the property is prepared for weather rather than reactive to weather. And having pre-knowledge of strong weather events is just something that a risk manager would love to have.
Yeah, I'm really curious in general if you could say something specifically about water and mines and kind of yeah, sort of the risks associated with water.
Sure. So if the pit fills up with water and that's in an area where they're blasting or they're in their area of actually excavating the ore for production, that's going to hinder it. You've got to pump the water out or you've got to let it drain. The access to an ore excavation site is through this road structure that's in an open pit, and if those roads are impeded by water, or there's rifts in them, those have to be repaired, and those all equate to business interruption. And then on the water storage side, the tailings side, this is where wastewater is often stored before it's remediated to go back into the system. And if the storage areas have natural dammed pools, those can be impacted by a heavy rain as well.
And
So there's a
then,
variety of ways weather and precipitation can impact the mine site.
and is it also an issue on the drought side too?
It is because if you have a perennial moist environment and then it gets very dry, that can cause soil to contract. It can cause cracks and it can cause failure and slope failure and
Uh,
those kinds of things as well.
okay. Okay. Yeah. So it's almost like a Goldilocks issue.
Yeah,
So precipitation is just really something that you want to keep a close eye on here.
sure.
Yep. Okay. So finally, moving on to logistics and supply chains and the impacts of weather here. So once again, I probably don't need to say this, but supply chain interruptions are very frequently driven by weather. Here's a couple of examples. Recently, we had issues with drought in Taiwan, and this led to semiconductor chip shortages. So, if you were ordering an iPad from Apple, for example, instead of, say, the iPad appearing in your mailbox by the end of the week, it, might have said 6 weeks delay, for your iPad. And this was literally because of weather, because of the fact that there was a drought in Taiwan, which is where many of these chips are manufactured. There was also another good example is flooding near Bangkok, and this happened in 2009, and this is still something that people write about. And this flooding caused delays and price shocks across consumer electronics that were still felt 5 years after the event. And so this included things like hard drives, automobiles. For example, I was one of those poor graduate students trying to order a hard drive at this time, and the price that I had budgeted for it, it doubled. So this was a time where you'd have to pay, $1,500 for a hard drive, and now it was like 3,000. And so it was just one of those things that just really stays in my mind of like, oh, this is the impact of weather. It has real impacts in the real world. And so, what we wanted to highlight here is that it is an El Nino year. It is possibly even a super El Nino year by the end of the year. El Ninos are linked to major drought conditions over Central America. This is where the Panama Canal is located. The Panama Canal is located in a region where fresh water is used for their locks. And so, what this means is that when there isn't enough fresh water at their reservoir linked to the canal, this is called, I think, Lake Gatun. And when there's not enough fresh water in Lake Gatun, then there are limitations to shipping loads and frequency that are brought on by the fact that there's just not enough water to fill up those locks. And so this happened before with our last super El Nino just 4 years ago, or sorry, 3 years ago. And it is very looking like it's in the cards for this coming end of year into 2027. So, Jan, from your work at APL Logistics, would love to sort of hear some of your perspectives on impacts of weather in logistics and supply chains.
Right. So you can see here I highlighted two things: transportation access and timeliness. And that's really the upshot. Um, if you're supplying logistics services, um, you need to understand, where you're going to be delayed in terms of access and also time. Um, so being able to predict that, forecast that, it's a better information when you're providing services to a user. But also, if there are issues where you've got to reschedule your transit route, for example, the Panama Canal's out, you now have to go down around southern South America. That adds certainly to the cost, and you can price your services accordingly. On the receiving side, if you knew this was going to happen and you had to predict that, well, I'm going to have to wait extra time for my materials to reach my warehouse, you know that you can plan for that. Um, so having done the risk management role at a logistics company for 3 years in recent time here, my efforts were to keep senior management operations abreast of things, but we didn't have the kind of data that Planette offers in terms of this week or monthly viewpoint out on the runway here. So having that information would have been super useful to do my job, to identify and plan for delays, alternatives, understand potential damage to warehouse structures. We actually had an incident in India where we were operating an intermodal warehouse for a variety of companies, including the Gap and IKEA. And there was a massive rain event. The warehouse flooded and damaged a lot of material and inventory. And had we known there was going to be that event, we could have done inspections and shored up the warehouse prior to the rain. This is really important for a risk manager. And in addition, we might have adjusted our insurance profile for that particular country, that particular region, or that particular facility, had we known what was going to come down. So,
And especially in a country like, as I said, in the tropics, where a lot of these warehouses and facilities are located, these forecasts are excellent. So there really is, often months of lead time.
Sure. And you find that, the regulatory environment is less strict outside once you get outside the developed countries. And so having the ability to inspect and plan and maybe bring in sandbags or shore up your roof or whatever beforehand is really kind of key to keeping these things safe and protected.
Great. Well, y'all, this has been an awesome 30 minutes, and this is all the time that we have today. So thank you so much for being here. And just saying, if any of this information sounds useful and applicable to your industry, one of those that we went over today, or to a different industry, let's definitely talk. Our goal is really to help make this weather intelligence available to you and useful to you and other industries like yours. And so, yeah, would love to talk, brainstorm, figure out if we can be helpful or not, right? So, yeah, would love to have that conversation if that sounds right. So, our next webinar is going to be on surviving the heat, specifically extreme heat and its impacts across industries. That is in a couple of weeks. And if you miss us a lot, you can find us on YouTube. All of our webinars are posted on YouTube. And here's the QR code that will link you directly over there. So thank you so much. And until next time, yeah, watch the weather.